What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Tom Aspinall sends a message to Jon Jones. Now that Jon Jones has indeed defeated Stipe Miocic and remains the UFC's heavyweight champion, Tom Aspinall is still doing his part to secure a fight with the GOAT contender. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. Unless you're just tuning into this sport called mixed martial arts, you know that for months now, fans and pundits have been calling for a bout between Jones and Aspinall. Immediately after Jones put Miocic away in jaw-dropping fashion at UFC 309, Aspinall resumed calling for a unification title fight with Bones. Case in point, during the UFC 309 post-fight show, the interim champion said this. Well, when Jon Jones was doing his speech, I was looking directly at the UFC brass, Dana White and Hunter Campbell. Both of them turned to me at the same time and pointed at me and winked at the same time. So to me, that says that there's something big in the pipeline. This is the biggest fight in the UFC. This is massive. Potentially one of the biggest fights in MMA right now. If that doesn't interest Jon Jones, then I don't know what else we can do. Everybody knows that this is the fight to make. This is the fight that the people want. This is the fight that the UFC wants. This is the fight that the fans want. This is the fight that has to happen now. And while discussing the fight with TNT Sports and how Miocic looked in the bout, Aspinall acknowledged the Asian legend looked slow. That was by design, exactly what I expected, to be honest. I thought the stoppage, I'm going to be honest with you, I thought it could have happened in the first. That half guard, when he had that position, he was landing textbook Jon Jones elbows, looking fantastic. Stipe was essentially running at him with basic boxing techniques, and in all honesty, he was too slow and old. Aspinall was on hand at the New York City event, and while assessing how Jones looked, the explosive heavyweight all but acknowledged he believes he'll have the speed advantage if and when they scrap. The speed stood out, there's no chance that he can, I don't want to say too much. Further, Aspinall also reported that Dana White and the UFC brass were giving him winks and nods. Basically, a don't worry, we've got you, when Jones was talking about his future. I was getting a few nods and winks from the bosses when Jon Jones was talking about the next fight. That means a lot to me. Not only that, Aspinall also shared this eyebrow-raising news.
Just had a meeting with Dana, the other UFC brass, Hunter, and all success. And I'll see you next. Big news coming.
Of course, now the question becomes, will Jon Jones actually agree to fight Aspinall? For weeks, Jones has scoffed at the idea that he needs to fight Aspinall, and more recently, he claimed that he'd rather fight Alex Pereira. But as a lot of folks speculated could be the case, it sounds like Jones would be down to fight Aspinall if the UFC is willing to deliver truckloads of cash for this bout. Here was some of what Jones had to say about his future and the possibility of fighting Aspinall during his post-fight presser.
If that was my last fight ever, then I'm cool with that. That was the way to do it. Very, very high number. It's going to be a very high number, for sure.
Now, White was also asked during his post-fight presser about Jones's comments, and he seemed more than confident the promotion can get a Jones-Aspinall deal done. But just remember, when Jones asked for more cash to fight Francis Ngannou a few years ago, White was not happy about that. All that aside, Alex Pereira clearly has not pulled his name out of the hat yet for the Jones fight. The light heavyweight king reshared footage of Jones repeating his interest in fighting Poatan via social media. But what do you think? Will we finally see Jones versus Aspinall in early 2025? UFC updates. Now, let's take a look at fights that have been or fights that have been punted from UFC schedule. In more recent days, rumors have been flying around online as to the future of Nick Diaz, who was supposed to fight Vicente Luque on December 7th. Speculation has spiked due to a troubling video that recently went viral of a shirtless Diaz on the street attempting to start something on fire. This prompted concerns about whether the MMA legend could be battling addiction issues. When Dana White was asked about Diaz during the post-fight presser for UFC 309, he claimed he had no knowledge of a fight cancellation.
That Nick's out of the fight?
Yeah, that's been reported.
I didn't even know that.
Nick out of the fight?
I've seen a lot of videos of Nick.
Okay.
And Nate.
But recently, MMA Mania's Alex Bahunin reported that Diaz is indeed no longer fighting Luque. Instead, Temba Garimbo will battle the welterweight veteran. What do you make of this news? Do you think this closes the book on Diaz's fighting career? The 41-year-old Nick Diaz has fought only once since 2015, and that was in 2021 against Robbie Lawler. The Stockton star looked far removed from the fighter he once was in that contest. Speaking of the UFC's December 7th card, Marcel Dorff is reporting that featherweight contender Bryce Mitchell is set to battle jiu-jitsu titan Kron Gracie. For grappling enthusiasts, this is going to be a must-see battle. Both men are in need of a win, as Gracie has lost 2 straight and lost both fights by a one-sided decisions. Mitchell, meanwhile, has not fought since his Close Your Eyes Kids knockout loss to Josh Emmett last December. The outspoken fighter has lost 2 of his last 3 fights. And recently, the UFC shared its confirmed schedule for the first quarter of 2025. Not surprisingly, the UFC machine will continue to roll on almost on a weekly basis. Q1 will feature 11 UFC cards. And finally, former UFC veteran and middleweight contender Darren Till has his next fight set up, as the noted striker will box Tommy Fury on January 18th in London. Since exiting the UFC back in 2022, Till has competed just once, a TKO victory over Muhammad Muti in an exhibition boxing match this past July. Fury certainly doesn't have the boxing accolades of his brother Tyson, but he has gone 10-0 to date in pro bouts. Who do you see winning that fight? Renato Moicano calls out Michael Chandler. While almost all the spotlight for UFC 309 was fixated on a Jones-Miocic fight, it also featured a rematch between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. As many expected would be the case, the fight was a barn burner and then some. And as many predicted, Do Bronx won the bout. Following the scrap, which saw Oliveira win via unanimous decision, Renato Moicano let it be known he didn't care for how Chandler competed. Money proceeded to light iron Mike up over the various fouls he committed throughout the 5-round affair. The referee missed a clear eye poke to Do Bronx at one juncture, and late in the fight, Chandler pounded away at Oliveira with hammer fists, many of which appeared to be to the back of the head. It's impressive how many fouls Michael Chandler committed yesterday in the fight against Charles. Eye poke, strike to the back of the head, grabbing the cage. If he repeats that in his next fight, he needs to be penalized severely. What do you think? Should Chandler get hit with a massive fine if he commits any fouls in his next bout? Do you think Moicano's call out here is warranted? And all that aside, who do you want to see Chandler fight next? On account of his latest loss, and because Dana White said that Conor McGregor will not fight again until later in 2025, do you see Chandler fighting someone else? Francis Ngannou sends a message to Stipe Miocic. Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic went to war 2 times in the octagon, but following Miocic's loss to Jon Jones at UFC 309 and his subsequent retirement, the Predator heaped praise on his former foe. Ngannou and Miocic battled for the first time back in 2018, after Ngannou had laid waste to multiple UFC heavyweights. Miocic and his wrestling game proceeded to hand Ngannou his first UFC loss. The rematch 3 years later went very differently, however, as Ngannou brutally knocked out the renowned fighter in round 2. Well, after Miocic was stopped by Jones at UFC 309, and as many expected would be the case, the former champion announced that he's hanging up the gloves. That prompted Ngannou to share this message via social media. Thank you, champion Stipe Miocic, for all you've done for our sport, and above all, for the class you embody and the example you set. I'm grateful for how our battles have shaped me into a better fighter. Those moments taught me more than years in the sport. Enjoy your well-earned retirement, and best wishes for all your future endeavors. That's a classy statement from the former UFC champ and current PFL king, for sure. Following Ngannou's loss to Miocic, it became quite clear that the feared slugger spent considerable time working on his wrestling, and he's used those tools to secure victories since then. MMA community goes off on Dana White for bonuses. Following UFC 309, Dana White proceeded to announce that Jon Jones, Oban Elliott, and Ramiz Brahimaj had picked up Performance of the Night bonuses, and that Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira had secured Fight of the Night. For Do Bronx, it marked the 20th time he's received a Fight Night bonus, which is a ridiculously impressive stat. That also means he's added over $1 million to his UFC earnings as a result. But not everyone believes that White and the UFC are paying out what they should be to must-see fighters like Oliveira. Here was some additional reactions to the news received online. Dana White really is a cheap. He gambles millions weekly, yet he can't pay his fighters. Need that to be per fight, man. Guy is straight blockbuster. $50K always sounds demeaning, but this perspective is brutal. Holy, they've been paying him crumbs for years. You're telling me Jake Paul made $40 million and real fighters getting paid scraps? That's pretty depressing. Of course, this isn't the first time, and it won't be the last when people have scrutinized the UFC's business model, one that's reported to deliver far less of the promotion's revenue to fighters in comparison to other professional sports. But what do you think? Is it time for the UFC to start paying out more for Fight Night bonuses, or should the company guarantee more cash for all fighters by upping their purses? Dana White goes off on Jake Paul, and Jake fires back. If you thought you've heard the last of Jake Paul and Dana White trading verbal shots, now that Paul's bout with Mike Tyson is in the books, you were way off. For months, Paul and White have been feuding, with White dissing Paul's boxing resume and questioning whether the YouTuber is in fact a big combat sports draw. Paul, meanwhile, has repeatedly taken shots at White over the UFC's compensation model for fighters and how he promotes fights. Well, not surprisingly, during the post-fight presser for UFC 309, White was asked to comment on Paul's win over Tyson on Friday. Here's some of what Dana had to say.
Mike Tyson was right. I told him, Mike, you're basically 60 years old. And he's like, you honestly think this kid's going to do anything to me? He's not good. He's not going to knock me out. He's not going to do this. And you saw him. He tripped when he was walking down the thing. He had a hard time walking up the stairs. He had a knee brace on. And Jake Paul couldn't do anything to him. He made a ton of money. And I know people are mad. You stayed home on a Saturday night, but you didn't pay for it. You know what I mean? And, you know, Mike, this is what Mike Tyson, when Mike Tyson shows up, Everybody makes money, you know. Jake Paul is, you know, I don't have to tell you guys. You guys know. Mike Tyson is the A++++ side of that thing, and he was right. Jake Paul couldn't do to him. So he was right and I was wrong.
It wasn't long before Paul fired back. Via social media, the polarizing star had this to say about White's assertion that the massive money generated on Friday was largely due to Tyson. Crazy that we did a bigger gate than every UFC event in history, and that company is 30+ years old. Biggest gate of Mike Tyson's career. Biggest attendance of Mike's career. Biggest viewership of Mike's career. Biggest combat sports gate in US combat sports history outside of Las Vegas. It takes two to tango. And Paul also took the opportunity to remind White of what he's done to date in the boxing sphere. Dana White has been a boxing promoter for his whole career. All these nut riders need to do their research. His TV show failed. Couldn't sell 4K tickets in Dublin with that useless Irish boxer he's promoting. And he is not fighters first. He's Dana first. Builds you up and tears you down. Now Conor McGregor's hostage. Free Conor. What do you make of Paul and White's ongoing beef? And do you agree with it? Of course, regardless of where you come in on this, none of it changes the fact that Paul has almost exclusively fought dudes way beyond their primes, as Arash Makazi pointed out via social media. Jake Paul's recent boxing opponents and current ages: beat retired NBA player Nate Robinson, 40. Beat retired MMA fighter Ben Askren, 40. Beat retired MMA fighter Tyron Woodley, 42. Beat retired MMA fighter Anderson Silva, 49. Lost to boxer Tommy Fury, 25. Beat semi-retired MMA fighter Nate Diaz, 39. Beat retired boxer Mike Tyson, 58. Up next, Eryk Anders reveals what happened in last-minute cancellation. Fans who were looking forward to seeing former middleweight champ Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders throw hands at UFC 309 were hit with a late gut punch when it was announced that the latter was no longer competing. During the broadcast, all that was announced was that Anders had withdrawn due to a medical issue. Since then, the middleweight posted a video on social media in which Anders revealed that he had a nasty case of food poisoning.
Got food poisoning Friday night, was up throwing up all night, Friday night and morning Saturday. Made a decision to pull me from the card, and hopefully we'll get that fight with Weidman rebooked and rescheduled and get back to it. So feeling much better today, up and active. Still feeling a little weak, but it's a good day for some football. So we're here at the Jet Stadium to see the Jets versus Colts game.
It's good to hear that Anders is on the rebound and is not suffering from a serious medical situation. One would think that the UFC will look at rebooking Anders and Weidman to fight either next month or in early 2025. The two have already agreed to fight once, and it sounds like Anders could be ready to fight soon. Further, Anders has not fought since March when he recorded a decision win over Jamie Pickett, while Weidman recorded a TKO victory over Bruno Silva in his last fight, which was also in March. Do you want to see the UFC rebook this matchup, or would you prefer if the promotion went another route? The MMA community reacted after Tom Aspinall accidentally leaked how much he was paid for being the backup role at UFC 309. In the screenshot, you can see Tom responding to Hunter Campbell saying, "For $200K, I'd very much appreciate if he can wait until they walk." Here's what the MMA community had to say. "Man got $200K to make weight as a heavyweight, LMAO, goddamn. $200K and a trip to New York just to make weight, which at heavyweight is just skipping breakfast, not bad that. If he got paid $200K to sit there and be on standby, I see why John wants so much, cause that's f***ing ridiculous, LMAO. Yet people don't realize they take care of their fighters behind the scenes. LMAO, what makes it funnier is there's zero chance Jones would have fought if Stipe dropped out. $200K really isn't much to back up a massive pay-per-view. I'll myself if, Jesus, these negotiations get tense. $200,000 seems a bit low, no? I wouldn't show up as champion on short notice for less than $500,000 to $1 million. $200K for being a backup while knowing neither John or Stipe would fight him on short notice. Free money.